And welcome back, everybody, to Beyond Labels on 88.5 FM. And we're continuing our chat about Ida Hobbit today. And just want to give people just a little bit of a background of what's the legal situation is for people in the LGBTIQA plus community. So here in WA, our Equal Opportunities and Sexual Discrimination Acts and the various different other laws that cover protect people from discrimination from various things which are called protected characteristics. And some of those protected characteristics are race, religion, as well as the protection from discrimination against your sexual preferences, your sexuality, sorry, as well as sexual history, gender. I have to excuse me, people. Today I'm a little bit tongue-tied for some reason. I'll start that again. So, the discrimination against sexual orientation and gender history. So basically what that means is you are protected from discrimination because of who you love under sexuality. So if you're a gay, if you're a lesbian, if you're a bisexual, if you're a pansexual, you are protected against discrimination from that. You're also protected against discrimination in WA against your gender history, which basically means if you have received a gender recognition certificate. So if you are transgender and if you're transitioning and you have gone through the formal process of changing your gender, then that's called a gender history. So if you're partway through that process and you haven't gone through the formal process, you're not actually protected in WA. Federally, however, both sexual orientation and gender identity are protected characteristics. So that means if you're just going through your journey and you're starting out, like a lot of people do, because it takes a while before you qualify and can get a gender recognition certificate. But even if you are just on that journey, you haven't got that far, federally you are protected. And that's what the Giggle versus Tiggle case went under. It used gender identity as a protected characteristic, even though the particular trans woman who was involved, did have a full gender recognition certificate, but they were protected as any trans person would be. But here in WA, you're currently only partially protected. But discrimination comes in a lot of different ways, and some of it is very clear, such as in the case of Giggle versus Tiggle, where the person was actively excluded from using the service because of their gender. Others are a little less so, and are very hard to protect against. So these can be things in the workplace, and the things that, again, minority groups and also women face a lot of, but people in the LGBTIQA plus community, and particularly trans people, face even more. And that can be things like applying for a job and just never even being considered for an interview because you are trans. It can be in a workplace. You may be overlooked for promotion. You may be told that you cannot wear certain clothes that match your gender identity. You may be told that you can't, or may not even told, but just excluded from things which may involve customer contact, not being included in photos, business photos, and those sort of things. So discrimination can be something which is really clear. It can also be a lot of those little minor things which you may not even see, but others do. It could be not using your correct pronouns. There can be so many things. So what we're looking today is around how we can combat that. There are also a lot of particular areas where discrimination is even worse for people. So sport is a really big one. We've seen there is a huge problem in sport around homophobia. We see very regularly stories and news articles about people, in particular in footy, around somebody making homophobic slurs and attacking people based on their sexual orientation. But sport is even harder for people who have different gender identities. Women, for example, are continuously attacked. Trans women have been excluded from the Olympics, for example, even though scientifically it has been shown that trans women do not have any advantage in most sports. Yet they have basically been completely excluded now. Intersex people also face exclusion through the new rules. So if a woman in particular is intersex and may have a variation of their chromosomes, they can be excluded from sport without the need to actually prove they've got any advantage. They're just blanketly excluded. And the problem that we see with that is, by excluding people, particularly in sport, what you're doing is saying to everybody else in the wider communities that you're not welcome. So by excluding them in something like the Olympics, that flows down to the grassroots support and grassroots sports. And in grassroots sports, what we're there for is for community, is for fitness, is for health, it's for socialising. It's not all about being the best and winning. It's about community connecting, and it's a really big thing for our both physical and mental health. But when we exclude people based on their sexual orientation or their gender, what we're saying is you can't compete in this, you can't be part of the community, you don't get the health benefits, the physical health benefits, or the mental health benefits of that community and that sport. So that's a really, really big one that we have to challenge discrimination in. In sport is something that all people should be able to participate in, no matter what their sexuality is, no matter what their gender is, no matter what their nationality, their religion, or their disabilities are. We need to allow all people in sport in one thing area in particular. So we'll go back to a couple more songs now, and it is now 10 to 1. So we're almost halfway through the show, but remember, if you want to get a request in or tell a little bit about your story or where you may have been affected by homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, or intersex discrimination, you can send that through on 0440 133 885. You're listening to Beyond Labels with Jeannie.